Hey folks, I'm Pruitt, and today we're going to take a look at editing headshots. Hey folks, Pruitt here. Hope you're doing well. I'm unbelievable as always. Today we want to take a look at editing headshots. I have a client / friend of mine that I recently did some headshots for, and people were asking me, how do I go about processing headshots? My friend, he agreed to let me use his image in this tutorial to show how I go about processing headshots. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Lightroom and Photoshop, and let's start processing this headshot. Okay, so what we have here is just one of the shots, and it was shot in RAW using my Canon camera. A couple things to keep in mind when it comes to doing headshots is you have to understand what your client's message is with the headshot. Headshots are very important. They can be used with resumes and online profiles for branding and so forth, and also be used as just part of your social media avatars. Again, just more branding for the individual. So you really want to make sure you get these things right and make sure you get it to where the message from the client comes through within that headshot. I did an article about all of this stuff over on TechRepublic.com. I'll put a link in the video here to let you check that out. Okay, so we're looking at this here shot. This is just one of them. The key is he wanted to have this shot on a white background, and if you look at it, this is not a white background. Okay, so we can fix that in post. That's easy to do. Next, he just wanted it to look where he was just genuinely happy and professional and just, easygoing. And I think this pose works for that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just start editing this thing. And the very first thing I want to do is crop it down. Go ahead and crop this thing down so it's a little more intimate and in your face. Something like that, a nice little square crop. After that, I will also take a look at the camera profile that Adobe will hopefully recognize, and it did. This is Canon camera, and I use my 50mm lens here, so thank you, Adobe, for recognizing that. So we got that squared away, and that helps make sure your colors and vignetting and bowing is not going to really screw up your image here inside of processing. So that's something to take a look at whenever you hop inside of Lightroom. Okay, so now part of the touch-up process. First, this thing it's a little underexposed when I look at it. Now, the histogram says otherwise. It says it's fairly decently exposed. I think it's a little underexposed. Use your histogram as a guide. Don't use it as a gospel. You can use it as a guide, okay? So what I'm going to do is first go ahead and adjust the dehaze option. Dehazing gives it a little more contrast, and it also helps bring out a little bit of the details. If you do it too much, it's going to look really bad, so don't do it too much. So we're going to bump it up a little bit here. I think right about there is good. Okay, now I'll go ahead and increase the exposure on it because I think it was just a little underexposed and a little dark. That's looking more like it. Cool. Contrast. Take a look at the contrast to see if we can bring out a few more details amongst the color. Highlights. According to the histogram, the highlights are next to nothing. So if I drag it down, you're not going to see much of a change. I'm going to boost it just a touch. Nah, let's just leave it as it is. Shadows works really well as fill light. When you think of the shadow option inside of Lightroom, think of if you were standing there in front of your subject and just had a light pointed straight at them that's just going to fill up their space there. That's all it does. It doesn't light up the back or anything. It just basically puts light on them. And vibrance, we'll give it a little touch of that. You don't want to overdo the colors on these headshots unless the client says so. Okay, saturation, I don't want to go too far, because if you notice, if I go too far with the saturation, it almost looks like he has jaundice or something, and we don't want that. So we'll take it back down, vibrance back down. Okay, so from a color perspective, everything is looking fairly good. Exposure is looking pretty good. So let's get into a little more detail, just slightly more detail. Look at the HSL area, the luminance. Now, when shooting Caucasians, at least in my experience, you have Caucasians that are really, really fair skin, you know, really, really white. Then you have some that are really, really tan, and then you have some that are sort of in between. My man here, Carrie Head, he is sort of in between. So I want to make sure that this image, you know, gives him that same look and doesn't look all false, you know. So you want to take a look at the reds and the orange under the luminance. And I think I want to boost the orange just a little bit, because if I decrease it, he starts to turn a little weird color. So let's boost it up just a little bit so it looks a little more natural. And with the reds, I noticed again with Caucasian models, a lot of times during the shoot they get a little nervous, so they get a little red cheeks, or their face turns red, or in this instance his ears are getting a little red. So you want to try to be mindful of that in your processing. So I'm going to increase the luminance there to try to get rid of some of the red that was showing up here around his ears and a little bit around his nose and cheeks there. The blue will affect his shirt. I think a darker blue will look a little bit better on the shirt. Nothing's going to be affected with purple and magenta, so I can just skip all of that. Not going to do any split toning. Sharpening, most of my sharpening is going to be done inside of Photoshop, but I always do try to touch it just a little bit. Noise reduction, probably don't need any noise reduction. If I zoom in on it, it looks, no, there's a little bit of artifacts right there. So let's go ahead and do a little noise reduction to try to smooth out this image some. Not too much, but just enough. Okay. All right, I think we're almost there with this here headshot. Now the white background, let's go ahead and fix that. What I'm going to do is use the adjustment brush in Lightroom, or just press K on the keyboard. And I'm also going to use this Wacom tablet that was sent to me. Now I have my own back there, but Wacom sent me another one. This is their newest model of the Intuos tablet. So I'm going to try that one out. So bear with me, because I haven't really fully set this thing up to my likings. I played around with it for about 10 minutes, but hopefully I don't screw up this video with this device. I'm going to hit the K on my keyboard and open up the adjustment brush, and I want to turn this background to be a little more white instead of this blue. And I like to use the teeth whitening option, because what it does is it desaturates whatever it is you're going to brush. So I'm going to put a little pin here, and I'm going to start brushing this pale blue wall, and you'll notice it's starting to turn somewhat white. And the key with the brush is make sure you have it big enough, and make sure you have it with a nice feathered edge. I like to just bump the feather all the way up to 100, because that way the edges are not all crispy and sharp. You want it to be a little bit feathered so it looks a little more natural when it transitions from one shade to another. And as usual, if you want to see where your mask has been applied inside of Lightroom, you can either tap this little checkbox down here where it says show the selected mask, or just hit O on the keyboard and that'll pop up. So all of the red is what I painted. And I think I want to get a little bit closer to my subject. And you notice, even though I'm close to the subject, it's not a hard edge on him. It's soft, it's feathered. And that's what we want. If you happen to go over it, you know, like if I brush too much like that, just hold down your Alt key and you can erase it that way. All right, so now I'm going to get rid of this mask. Just hit that O. So now that I know that I've brushed everything, it still looks a little blue. It looks lighter than it did before, but I want to increase the exposure on it, and that'll bring the white up a little bit more. I think that looks fair enough. Don't want to go too bright. Okay, yeah, that looks all right. Looks like I missed a little bit down here in the corner on this collar, so we'll brush in. Yeah, that'll work. So now we got a nice white background on this headshot. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to do the sharpening phase before I get into some of the other details, because it's got to be sharp before you start really fine tuning it. And I like to do my sharpening with the high pass filter inside of Photoshop. I did a video about the high pass filter recently. I'll put a card here on the screen to let you check that video out, just in case you're not familiar with using it. But inside of Lightroom, if I want to take this into Photoshop, I just right click, say edit in Photoshop. And Photoshop will start initializing and doing its thing. All right, so now we have them in Photoshop. First things first, let's set this up to have a duplicated layer so it's non-destructive editing. I'm not going to ruin my original shot. And since I'm going to do some sharpening, I need to have 2 copies of my original layer. And I like to put the second copy on the top. Then we're going to right click and say convert to a smart object. We'll do the same thing for the other one. Just right click on it and say convert to smart object. Okay, by converting them to smart objects, it gives me a little more freedom to make the adjustments. So with this middle layer here, I'm going to select filter, blur, Gaussian blur, so we can start our high frequency processing. And we'll keep it at 7.8. I think that's blurred enough. And then we'll go to the other layer, and we'll say filter, other, high pass. Never mind that, that's the Wacom popping up on the screen. Okay, I think I'll go with about, let's say 8.8 just for the heck of it. Click OK. And then we'll hit linear light on the blend mode. All right, so that is definitely sharper, but I think it's a little too sharp. An easy way to do a compare and contrast is to put your 2 layers into a group. So if you just hold shift and select them both and then do Control G, that'll put them into a group, and then you can turn the group off and you'll be able to see the difference between the original one and the sharpened version. I think that's a little too sharp, so I'm going to back down the high pass filter. Let's take it to maybe 6. See, that looks a little bit better to me. We'll toggle between. That's before, that's after, that's before, that's after. And I think that works right there. Cool. Now, since I know I'm done with sharpening, I'm just going to merge everything together in that group. There's no need for me to worry about fixing that afterwards, so I can continue to just work as usual. So we get into the nitty-gritty of the touch up and the corrections and a lot of sensitive stuff when it comes to headshots. Before you do your headshot, make sure you speak with your client about your touch-up process. People will have blemishes on their faces that you can try to brush away. Sometimes that offends people because they want those blemishes to stay there. So go over the process and find out what you can get away with and what you shouldn't get away with as far as the actual touch-up process. You know, like he's got wrinkles right here on his forehead. I think that needs to go away. He may have been okay with it, but in this example, he was okay. He may not have been okay with it, but in this example, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of him anyway. I'm going to use the healing brush spot healing brush here, and I'm just going to brush over the wrinkles. Actually, let me zoom in a little more. Just zoom in a little more, and we're just going to brush over the wrinkles there, like that, to try to get rid of them. Oh, this Wacom doesn't like me. It's moving around. Alright, so the wrinkles, they're still there, but they're not as pronounced, so it's not too bad. Adobe's computational editing does a really good job of recognizing the pixels around it and tries to blend everything for you, so it doesn't look terribly harsh. And then see this little spot right there? Let's get rid of that. Little dot, get rid of that. And all of this is very easy to do with that spot removal tool. Let's go down here and take a look at his neck. It's got a couple red blemishes there. Get rid of those. Don't need that. Necklines are really sensitive. Some people want to keep them. Some people say please get rid of them. Just depends on your model. Get all of this stuff squared away and cleared up prior to doing your shoot. This way everybody is on the same page, and you as the photographer will not get that surprise phone call saying that they hate their images and you're not going to get paid for your job. Take some of this stuff off. Not everything, but some of them. Like some of this just gives them a little character, in my opinion. So play it by ear. Okay, I think we're good there. Actually, let's get rid of some of the wild hair. Try to smooth that out a little bit. You know, no, he's not clean shaven, but still needs some type of neatness. Okay, I think that looks pretty daggum good. Cool. So now we can go back into Lightroom because we've done all that we need to do as far as the cleaning up, if you will, because some of that cleanup stuff you can do it in Lightroom, but it's a lot easier here inside of Photoshop. So to go back to Lightroom, you just hit File, Save, and then when you close, it takes you right back into Lightroom, and you'll see you have a new file. This is a TIFF file, and you'll see that none of the blemishes that were there a minute ago in Lightroom, all of those are gone. This is our fresh version. Next thing I want to take a look at is we can look at teeth whitening and eyes, because a lot of that stuff is just another nuance of headshots. When people look at headshots, ideally the first thing they look at is the eyes, next thing they look at is the teeth, and then they look at hair. Well, we got 2 out of 3 going on right here. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of work with his teeth. And I'm not going to sit here and say his teeth are horrible or anything like that, but whiter teeth look better. They just do. So I'm going to hit K on the keyboard to open up my adjustment brush, and I'm going to use that same teeth whitening adjustment. And I'll put a point on his teeth. Actually, let me move that point out of the way, and I'll zoom in a little bit more. It makes the brushing process a little bit easier when you got some real estate to work with. And we'll just brush like so. And what's happening is it is desaturating his teeth, removing any color that's there, just like that. And if you're still not satisfied with it, you can go over here to your settings and bring down the saturation even more if you have to. I am struggling with that. There we go. And I'm still not happy with that, so I'm going to take the exposure up to maybe 0.45 or 0.5. Okay, that's looking a little better. And just a little more brushing right there. You see, that's a big difference. And I'm zoomed in pretty close, so it's going to look a certain way. Make sure you look at it when it's zoomed out from the regular perspective, I think I brushed a little too much. I brushed over his gum right there and wiped out his gums. There, that's a little better. So now we'll zoom out and see how it looks, because you don't want it to look too dadgum fake. And I'm going to put a white level on here, because right now his teeth looks gray. We don't want them to look gray. We want them to look, you know, white. See, that's super white. That's way too much. We'll go right about here. That's not bad. Okay, so teeth whitening is done. Now let's do his eyes. So we'll click new and we'll do the same adjustment brush. But as usual, you zoom in tighter, like so. And we're going to get the whites of his eyes. And we'll brush in there. Just try to lighten that up some. It's really tiny over there, so I gotta zoom in closer. Right there. You don't want to go too far over the iris or anything. Just get the whites. Gives his eyes a little more life. Okay. So now let's zoom out, take a look-see. Yeah, that looks much better. Much better. See, this is what it did look like. All blurry. And this is what it looks like now. That's much better. And if you want, you can do a little bit of sharpening and clarity around the eyes. Again, because that's one of the first things people look at with headshots. So I'm going to go just a little overboard. Do another adjustment brush. And I will do clarity this time. And you notice the clarity option is set to 50. Put my pen there. And I'm going to paint over his eyes. Do you notice the difference? As I did that, it almost made his eyes a little bit too dark. So let's decrease that clarity just a touch. Let's take it to maybe 12. Let's start there. And then we'll increase the sharpness. There we go. That's looking better. And do the same for the other eye. And then you zoom out to make sure it looks okay and doesn't look too fake. I think that's a little overdone. Let's take it to 12. Okay, I think that works for us, folks. So we can turn off the adjustment brush and get ready to set this up for final. So what he needs now is a good old vignette. Just play around with what looks right to you. I don't think it needs too much. I think right about there is good enough. If you want to play with your camera calibration profiles, it's really common for people to play with the red channel and push it more into orange, and then the blue channel, push it more into teal. Looks good on a lot of shots. I don't know if it'll look right on this one. So far, not so much. Yeah, he just looks like a Oompa Loompa or something. So let's not touch that, folks. There. That's a little better. I'm going to look at that luminance one more time just to be safe. Yeah. Cool. Actually, I have one more idea. Let's put a little more detail on his beard. So let's go back and do another clarity adjustment. And we're going to brush onto his beard some. Yeah, look at that. See, that brought the whiskers out a little more. Okay, so I'm going to take it down just a notch. There. Perfect. I like that. Cool. And then that's pretty much it. I don't think I need another crop. I can give it the Instagram crop if I want to. Just close that. Set it to that. And hit done. Yeah, I think we're good to go. That looks much better. This was the original. That's the original. There we go. And this is what we have now. That's a much better shot. All right, so there you have it. Not too hard on this particular headshot, and some headshots could be a little more difficult. This one was not too bad, but the main thing is make sure you're doing whatever it is that's your client is requesting, and try to make sure you're keeping their best interest at heart. You know, some of the enhancements and adjustments may not suit them. Go over that stuff with your client beforehand, and even provide proofs before you provide a final image. That'll help keep everybody on the same page and keep everybody happy and keep you getting paid. Thank you again for watching this video. If you have any questions or other suggested videos you'd like for me to do, just leave a comment below, and we'll see if we can get that put together for you. Be sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. That way you'll be able to catch up with these videos as soon as I get them uploaded. If you like audiobooks, I have an affiliate link here in the bottom. Just go to antpruitt.com/audible, and Audible is going to give you 2 free audiobooks when you sign up for a 30-day free trial. So head on over to antpruitt.com/audible and get yourself 2 free audiobooks. That is just one way to help support my channel, and I thank Audible for their support. All right, folks, again, I catch you guys on the next video. Thank you for watching. Get out there and keep shooting. Let's create and dominate. Peace.